Welcome back to the Pop Agenda, where we cover everything under the sun of pop culture. I'm here with the talented Val from the band Lottie Lum. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. To start off, can you please introduce yourself to the audience and let us know what you do and where listeners can find you?
My name is Valorie or Val, part of the band Lottie Lum. Kind of wear a couple different hats within the band. We're on all streaming services. Outside of that, I do press and PR for Manor Records here in Kansas City.
Ooh, that's so cool. I have so many questions for you about that. So thank you so much. Let's just get straight into it. So, okay, as an artist, what would be the most ridiculous item you would demand on your dream hospitality writer?
That is so funny. I was talking about writers earlier today. I think the most ridiculous item that I would demand would be a bowl or a container of baba ganoush, because I feel like that's hard to find just off the cuff.
That's perfect. Love that. So, what was the first concert you went to and how was that experience? Did it shape the creativity you harness today?
I have two different answers for that. The first answer is when I was 10 years old, I saw Selena Gomez. I know.
The Selena Gomez? What?
And 303 was opening. And so that
Slay.
was, very formative for 10-year-old me. But then at the same time, when I was 19, I went to my first DIY show, and that was equally as formative in different ways. And I think both of them definitely informed the way that I see live music and enjoy concerts and experience live music in general. But I owe a lot more to that first DIY show for kind of pushing me into the DIY scene and the indie scene, because it's kind of informed where I am now in the scene as a listener, as a performer, and just as someone who exists in that space.
Love that. Yeah, I bet you can learn a lot from those like underground DIY shows. I definitely
Absolutely.
need to like start going to some. What are your favorite bands and music artists?
That's a loaded question. I have a couple. My favorite one of all time in the whole world is a DIY emo band called Summer Brews. They're based out of Indianapolis in Indiana, and they're very kind of standard Midwest emo sound, but they do a lot of like fun little things sometimes that sets them apart from other people. And then someone who's kind of on the other end of the music spectrum, I would say, is Annabelle Denda. And she does very like folk kind of indie sounding stuff, but it's also very innovative in the way that she both uses instruments and the way that she writes and all of that kind of stuff.
Have you seen any good new movies lately?
Earlier this week, we went and we saw Toy Story 5 and we saw Backrooms. Backrooms was huge. I loved Backrooms. I'm a big horror fan. And of course, whenever there is an indie horror director or movie or something that pops off, that's always a huge green flag. Indie horror is great. I really liked it. And of course, Toy Story 5 was good. It's always good,
I haven't seen Toy Story 5. I'm kind of like, I love Toy Story, but I'm just kind of over it personally.
No,
but
that's fair.
But I'm sure it was a great movie. But Backrooms, oh my gosh, I saw that. I was so captivated. I will say I have more questions coming out of it than I did going in, but that just means it's a good movie that you should watch again.
Yeah.
If you could pick any artist or band, dead or alive, to see it live in concert, who would you?
That one's tricky. And I think, my gosh. Okay, I think my answer would be the band Bad Luck. They're based out of the Northeast, on the coast, I think maybe Philadelphia. But the reason I choose them is because I have attempted to see them 4 times. I had tickets 4 times, and each time it didn't work out for some reason or another. And so I feel like there would have to be some genie or some magic involved at this point to get me to that concert.
Yes, let's manifest it.
For real.
Let's manifest that 5th and final time.
Yes.
Love that. So what's your favorite part of all that you do? Is it working close with musicians, writing, doing PR, or creating music?
I think it's a big combination of all of them. My favorite hyper-specific thing that I get to do is I like being kind of that kind of liaison between the musician and the press, whether it's a press outlet, press person, or I'm writing about it or I'm doing something with it, because it's kind of that first experience that people are getting to have with a release or with a musician or with a show, whatever it might be. And kind of being the person that is able to introduce that first experience to everybody else who is listening to it, watching, whatever. That's something that's really special.
What are some of your favorite local bands or artists here in Kansas City?
My favorite of all time, I would say, is Hecra, spelled Heccra. Very hardcore Midwest emo. Seen him quite a few times, both in the city and states away. And he's definitely like a leading figure in the KC emo hardcore punk scene. And then there are a couple people that I would kind of associate with that kind of group and one would be the Blast Monkeys. There's some pretty awesome, pretty rockin' Midwest emo. It's always a party, it's always a good time. And then, of course, I would say another one that I really like seeing is Kirsty Lynn. She is very folk, very country, but also for her, it's always a party. So it's always a
Yeah,
good time.
I've looked into her. She's really good.
Yes. She's also just such a nice person. So all the vibes that are in the space are just so good.
It's great when the artist or the band is the full package, like
Yes.
there's so many elements that go into it.
Agreed.
So besides getting inspired by 303 and Selena Gomez, what sprouted your love for music?
Well, I was born into a musical family. Just about everyone played some instrument or another. I started piano lessons when I was 6 years old, and then it kind of spiraled out of control from there.
Ooh, love that.
Yeah.
What all instruments do you play?
Throughout the course of my life, I've played piano, cello, violin, guitar, bass, both upright and bass guitar, pentatonic flute, drums, and trumpet.
Oh my gosh, you're so talented. That's so cool. I learned how to play the piano a little bit. Like I had an Evanescence songbook and I could
As you
play a
should.
little bit of Bring Me to Life and a little bit of Farther Away, but then I just got too overwhelmed. But I did find like I really like producing music. I don't necessarily like know how to play an instrument or whatever, but that's so cool. I admire you so much for that. Okay, and then what's a song, music, artist, or band that you're obsessed with right now?
Right now, and I know for a fact I'm going to pronounce their band name wrong, so I'm also going to spell it out. I think it's pronounced Wakely. I feel like I am absolutely wrong in that, but it's spelled Uakelee. And they had a 2023 album that I remember when it came out, loved it then, but I recently revisited it and just blown away again for the second time. And it's this really, really interesting mix of kind of the indie pop, like passion pit sort of sound combined with kind of the Midwest emo sort of sound that you might hear from bands like Mom Jeans, Hot Mulligan. But then at the same time, you're hearing some stuff that you would probably expect more to hear from bands even like Sublime. Like it's very all over the place, but the way that they do it is so interesting and it's so cohesive that it's really hard not to listen to the whole thing and be like, "Oh my god."
I love when you can listen to an album all the way and there's like no skips. And
Yeah,
Wakely, the way you describe them sounds very innovative. So everybody should definitely go check out Wakely.
absolutely.
So you're currently working on an EP with your band Lottie Lum. How has the creative process been shaping up, and what is the sonic direction of the project?
The best way to describe it in maybe an abstract form is we all came together individually and we said, "This is what I am writing about. This is what I am feeling like it should sound like." And then we just kind of figured out a way to mash it all together. And so the best way I could describe it, if I were to put it into a genre, would be kind of an indie pop Midwest emo situation, maybe some like girl punk. But then for the creative process, it's been a lot of that mishmashing, but it's also been a lot of these are all people that we all spend a lot of time together. We all know each other very well. And because of that, and because we have a lot of shared experiences, we've been drawing a lot from those shared experiences or from experiences that we've had that can relate to each other. And we've been finding new ways to process these experiences together through that.
Oh, I love that. I think it's super important for a band to like really get along at that level. And that brings me to my other question. How did Lottie Lum get together? I think you mentioned did you all know each other before starting the
Yes.
band?
We all were talking about making music like independently. And then we all kind of looked at each other and said, "Oh my gosh, we should be a band." And then we were.
Oh my gosh, and
Yeah.
that's where it began. Love that. That's so cool. What's the most fun part about getting to write about music and sharing new artists with people?
A lot of the time, it is a multi-month process. And what I mean by that is you will hear the first release, the press release of the album by yourself, and then you will write about it, or you will do whatever you're going to do. And then you go to that release show, weeks, months later. And it's like the full culmination of all of the press and stuff that you did for that album. And it's this really nice, like full circle process of you hear it when it's still in development and you are pushing it out into the world, trying to get other people to be as excited as you are. And then you go to that album release show or whatever show, and, it's everybody there who's also just as excited as you are, perhaps because of something they read from you or whatever. But, it's a very full circle.
Do you feel social media and the rise of content creators and influencers has improved the process of independent musicians getting their music out there and creating a fan base? And if so, how?
I think it's a complicated question from the perspective of, I think back in the original days, kind of social media, like early YouTube, early Instagram, and so forth, it was a lot easier as a content creator and as a musician to get that content out there and for it to be seen. And that's just because the pool of content creators was a lot smaller, while the pool of people consuming that content was, the same. And now that we've got a very oversaturated market of content creators and music creators, etc., and that same amount of people consuming, it's kind of like trying to find one specific item in an extremely giant grocery store. And so, it has improved it in some ways. And it also has made it harder in some ways. At this point in time, it's a lot harder to get noticed and get recognition unless you're really pushing the social media and the content creation. And so these creators have to be kind of a one man production where they do their content creation and they make their music and they do all their advertising,
Right.
and what do you do about that other than kind of play the game and hope that it works out?
While the rise of like social media culture has made the entry of barrier a little lower for independent musicians, but now the pool is like so much bigger that
Yeah,
it's almost like, yeah, it helped in comparing to before, but now it's like another problem kind of. And then
exactly.
that reminds me of like, okay, I'm not one of those people that are like, they see a negative comment and then they're like, oh, that's a bot. No, like, I'm not like that.
Yeah.
But there are bots out there, which is like, that's another story. Like, that's a totally different thing that I don't necessarily want to get into. But yeah, I can totally see that. Does your experience behind the scenes in PR and journalism change how you approach writing and recording your own music? Or are those separate worlds for you?
I think initially it did because I could see from a press and PR standpoint, this is going to be easier to market or this will be harder to market. But I think also as a creator, you have to kind of overcome that emotionally or mentally to make the creation process be smoother, but also more fulfilling. If you're so focused on during the creation process, what's going to market best, you're not going to create your best product, but you're also not going to have as much fun doing it.
Right. Yeah, I found that too. Do you think that like the one of like the keys is just like make sure you're having fun with it and not overthinking it?
Absolutely.
Do you think reviews are an integral part of music promotion?
I think so. And I think even further, the kind of review or the platform that it's on is really important. Like with the rise of Fantano and the rise of video reviews, that's obviously been this whole big thing. And people are doing it on Instagram and, YouTube shorts and so forth. But, prior to that, we had blogs and we had magazines and zines and, but I think reviews generally are super important. But I think also reviews depending on the platform, can be more or less impactful depending on the genre, the audience, and so forth. And it's just going to be really cool to see how reviews change the music scene as the social media scape continues to grow.
I think it's really interesting to see because I'm 33. I've seen changes. I haven't seen that many changes, but I've seen changes with all of this. So it's only going to keep changing and evolving. So I'm with you there. I'm like really interested to
Oh,
see
yeah.
how things evolve, hopefully for the better. When did you start creating music and what's that process like for you?
I think I first initially started creating music in maybe middle school or high school, definitely early teenage years. But for me, the process is kind of the same every time in terms of like the steps I take and when in the process those steps are taken. So a lot of the time I will start out with a set of lyrics, usually just a verse and just a chorus, or just a verse and just a pre-chorus. And then from there, I will mess around on the guitar or the piano or what have you, and everything kind of builds out from there. But I think it's super fun because when you don't write everything all at once, you can sometimes get better ideas after figuring out what your melody is going to be.
Definitely. Yeah. So like just to clarify, do you start with like just the lyrics with no melody?
Correct.
Okay, love that. It's cool when you haven't finished like all of the lyrics and then like you're later in the production stage and then you just get this like aha moment. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is what goes here. And it's like,
No,
yeah.
exactly. Yes.
What was your first gig working behind the scenes and what shows have you worked?
A couple years ago, we drove a band from Kansas City to Denver as part of their tour because of a van situation. But also at the show, we were helping out with press, load in, load out. And that was like my first real experience with like loading in, loading out. And I think that's why I like think about it so much is because it was the first like big tech moment. And that was just really cool, I guess, because it was my first non-press behind the scenes kind of situation. And then, of course, we had Manor Fest earlier this year, and I did just about everything you could do for that. And it's just really cool. I don't know. There's just so many little intricate pieces that go into everything.
What venues in KC have you worked in? Do you have a favorite venue?
I've worked quite a few, either in Manor Fest or other capacities. And my favorite venue, the answer will always be the same. And it's for sentimental reasons, not for any actual reasons. But it's Farewell. And then I also like their sister venue, Howdy, but I like Farewell more. The vibes in there are just immaculate. You can't get anything better than that vibe-wise in the city.
I'm definitely going to have to go check out a show there. What's the biggest difference between how fans see an artist or band on stage versus how they operate backstage?
I think it is definitely like you are masking up. You're putting on a performance when you're on stage versus off stage. And obviously the fan interactions differ between being in performance mode, not being in performance mode, but also the way that an artist will carry themselves is different, obviously in performance mode or not in performance mode. And I would just say that there is definitely a switch you can see with some people where it's like, okay, they are emotionally ready and it's just like the switch flips and they are suddenly performance mode. Like maybe a good example I would say of that is like when Chapel Roan, if you've seen like some of her behind the scenes stuff, there's definitely, you can tell for her a moment where it like switches.
What are some examples of, like, maybe you don't have any, but do you have any wild or chaotic experiences you've had when working gigs?
I don't know. I would say maybe the most crazy one, and I wasn't like super working this. I was doing a very minor press thing. And this was all going to plan. This was just part of the show. But I went to Fochella in Ohio in 2023. I think it was 2023. Yes. And there was a battle set between two of the bands, and just they were fitting 10 people up on this very small stage. Already it was just crazy to see because they're all like packed in like sardines and they've all got instruments and, and at the same time they've got like stuff projected on the back and it's like flashing lights because it's like the bands are going like, one band and then the other one and so forth. And it was extremely chaotic, but it was at the same time extremely well done because it was all managed very well. But as a press person, trying to figure out how to report that on that was insane. That was wild.
You don't have to name any venues or anything, but have you ever worked at a venue and then the vibe was totally off? Can you tell me about that experience?
There was a venue that was not in Kansas City, and already like the way that the people who were also working the venue, not just in like a band capacity, but also in like a venue staff capacity, the way that they were interacting with showgoers and vice versa, the way that showgoers were interacting with these people in a way that made it seem like they had been interacting like this for a while, like this was a trend. It was really odd. It was really off-putting. Like you had showgoers like sitting up on the stage, like chilling out, like they were reserving their seat. And then like the venue staff were like, yeah, okay, cool. And they were putting their drinks up on the stage, like open drinks next to equipment. And the venue staff was like, yeah, great. It was just so strange and genuinely very off-putting because it felt very, I don't care from the venue staff. And at the same time from the showgoers, it was also very, I don't care. I don't give it, a freak, It was just so weird vibes.
As a concert goer, I've actually been to one show when I lived in California that was like everybody working the venue was like falling asleep.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know why. I'm not gonna assume anything. It was just super messy, and I had a meet and greet, and I was like, well, hello, I have a meet and greet. Do I get instructions for that? Or like, oh yeah, here's this little paper. But so it's good when people have when. It's good when it's a good experience.
Yeah.
Have you worked any gigs for any notable artists or bands, like anybody that listeners might know?
The most notable would definitely be Greeting Committee with this most recent Manor Fest.
Yes.
And then any emo heads listening, Hot Mulligan.
So you volunteer for a record label based in Kansas City called Manor Records. What do you do there, and can you tell me a little bit about the label?
My official title as a volunteer is press and PR lead, but I'm kind of known among the team as the chief vibes officer at the same time. I know. And I just wear many hats, and so that kind of has become what it is. What I do there mostly is, of course, press and PR. But my specific stuff that I do is on the national side. So it's press and PR outlets, websites, video influencers, etc., that are not based in Kansas City. And a lot of the time it's more regional places like Chicago outlets or Denver, Oklahoma City, Texas, so forth, St. Louis. And then we have another person there who's also in press and PR, and she does all of the local press.
Manor Records is a nonprofit label. How does all that work?
Yeah, so we sign X amount of artists every year. Sometimes they will carry over to the next year. Sometimes they decide to go work somewhere else. That's up to them. And we give them X amount of funding every year to put that towards recording costs, instrument costs, production costs, touring costs, what have you, whatever they might need. And we continuously raise funds throughout the year through Manorfest, through other events to then put towards just, their funding, but also event funding for them, extra funding for them, whatever that might be. And then we also have some stuff coming up in the future where we might be able to be looking at supporting the rest of Kansas City artists in different ways, whether that's through connections or resources, what have you. We're still trying to figure all that out, but it's looking like a pretty bright future in that regard.
That's so cool. I love that for Kansas City. I grew up here and I don't know, it's just maybe this wasn't around to when I was growing up or maybe it was, but I don't know, it's just so cool. When you told me about it, I was like, what? There's the Kansas City record label? What? That's so cool. How did you get connected with Manor Records?
I've always kind of been in the same bubble as them. I was working with a different record label previously that is kind of similar in the way that they operate, a little bit different. And so when Manor Records put out a post last year where they were like, we're looking for volunteers in these specific areas, I was like, oh my gosh, I do that at this other place, but at the other place I did it all remote. Wouldn't it be so cool to do all of this but in person? And so I applied, and that's how we got there. But I've also kind of just been in the same circle as them for a long time. Friends who knew people, or I've been to some of the shows, so forth.
What artists are on the roster at Manor Records?
We have Albert, and he performs by himself or with his full band, and he's an extremely talented trumpet player. If you've ever been to Atlas 9 in Kansas City, you've probably seen him play. Next one, we have Kirsty Lynn. She's usually performing solo. She has her album coming out soon. And we all love Kirsty Lynn in this house.
She's
do, yes. Amazing. Next, we have Jamogi. He performs by himself or with his band, Jamogi and the Jammers. He's very he's doing a lot of really cool stuff that's almost reminiscent of Fergie, even. I know. And so that's been so cool to see the evolution of, and also it's just so good. We have Paris Williams. He is an extremely talented rapper. He's part of the Seven Rings group, and he was previously part of the Black Star Kids group. He performed at FanFest this year, and his music was recently in the show Euphoria. And he's got some stuff coming up soon.
What?
Yes!
Congratulations!
That was so cool to find out. He's just, he's doing stuff all the time. Next, we have Frankie, and she's very R&B and has the most incredible voice that you've ever heard in your whole life. And she recently put out an EP, and it was her debut EP, and it was just so cool to see it come together. And seeing her perform is always a treat. If you ever have the chance, you should go. We also have Jess. She's a very talented R&B kind of pop girly. She has had her music in the Bel Air spinoff. So we also have Fritz Hutchison, and he also has a band called Fritz and Sons. So he will be solo or with his band. He is one of the most entertaining singers to watch. If you have a chance, you should see him. And he's also just out and about in Kansas City doing stuff. He is also a big theater performer. He was in the Wizard of Oz production recently.
Oh, cool.
Right? And so he does a lot of folk, kind of modern folk pop stuff. And a lot of the time he will perform with another one of our artists, True Lions, who can perform solo or with their band. And it's also a lot of very fun, kind of modern folk. And then the last one, MC Rue, he is just continuously impressive, is what I would say about him. Not only his recent album, Retreat 2, but also the things that he does in the community and the shows that he puts on are so involving. And so just, it involves everybody. Everybody can be there. Everybody is welcome. And he's just a wonderful person.
So what's the process of finding new artists to sign?
It's a little bit different, or rather it's a case-by-case thing, I would say. Sometimes, we will in the past have put out a call for applications. Sometimes it's we know ahead of time someone is going to leave the roster in the next year, and we already have somebody in mind because they express interest or we know them or so forth, so forth. And so it's very case-by-case basis, but it is really cool to to see like the music scene grow and like the possibility of who we could work with in the future continue to grow at the same time.
What about physical releases on Manor Records? Do you guys do physical media releases?
We do, and the form it takes is artist by artist because some of them are like super into cassettes, super into records or CDs. So Kirsty Lynn's upcoming album is going to be on a record. And, you know, like seeing the process of them like designing the jacket for it or like the case, that was so much fun. That was so cool to watch. But then also we have a sampler, which is like a bunch of the Manor bands put in a song of theirs that they pick. You know, it's all on one big record. And so we definitely do physicals a lot. We were more CDs in the past than we are now. And we're kind of shifting, I think, kind of everybody's shifting towards the record side of things.
Yeah, I feel like vinyl records are probably the biggest physical media for music right now. And I'm really excited to see cassettes are back.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, personally, I don't think I'll listen to a cassette, but I would definitely buy one to have and then, like, listen to it on streaming. That leads me to ask, what do you think about the importance, if any, for physical releases from artists today?
From like a very surface level standpoint, I think that it's an extra sort of collector's item that isn't like a wearable merch or it isn't something
Right.
that's more consumable. It stays with you for longer. And I think that's really important both as an artist and as a consumer of media and of items. But on the much deeper level, if like an example is there's a band that I like from Australia where they will occasionally pay their distro kid. So occasionally their music is on streaming. And when it's not, I have to pull out the CD. And as time goes on and as music becomes more and more stratified, whether it's a couple artists that are only on Tidal or only somewhere and only somewhere, and as people become more and more off grid, just as a trend, I think having physical media in terms of accessibility is really important. And I think we're going to see a bigger push for that from that reason within the next few years as people kind of want to get away from streaming for the sake of artists, but also for the sake of, you know, big company, you know.
Right.
And so I think we'll see a big push along those lines in the next coming years.
I think so too. See, I haven't ever heard of this happening for albums like digital downloads you buy, but I have heard a lot about like, I don't know what streaming services, for example, let's say Amazon, like you'll buy a movie where it says literally buy. It says
Yeah.
buy. So if you buy it, if it has the word buy, doesn't legally that mean that you own it? But then like 15 years later or however long later, they'll be like, our licensing expired. You actually don't own that. So, I mean, I feel like with that being something in our current environment in our culture, it's like I definitely see that physical media is coming back and I'm just really excited for it.
Same.
So tell me about Manifest. What is it and what goes on there?
In the most briefest of terms, it is the most wonderful thing that anyone could go to. But to be more detailed, this year specifically, we had 20 venues over the course of 8 nights with over
Ooh.
60 bands and performers.
Oh my gosh.
And we kind of tailored each lineup at each venue to the venue, the expected crowd, the other performers, the neighborhood. And the goal of it was not just to showcase these artists and showcase the talent of the city, but also to showcase each individual neighborhood in Kansas City and its culture and its history. Like, for example, Strawberry Hill. And we had our night at Hillsiders. And, you know, later on, we had a night that was more downtown with Record Bar and Lifted Spirits. And of course, we had a show at Farewell, which is off Stadium Drive. So it's more kind of, you know, with the sports kind of stuff. And then the final day was the streetcar day, where we had 3 different venues throughout the city with the Art Museum, Kemper, the Public Library, and then the Casey Current Stadium with people riding the streetcar to each between the shows. And so it was both a way to showcase the artists, but to showcase how the artists make the city and how the cities make the artists at the same time.
I love that. It sounds like you guys are like doing great things for the community. And like I said, I grew up here. I lived in California for like 8 years and then came back recently. And it's just so refreshing to find all of this once I came back. I love that. Are there any upcoming Manor Records releases or events you're excited for right now?
We have, of course, Kirsty Lynn's upcoming album. There will be a crap ton of shows this fall, and we do kind of a monthly bring your own vinyl night as a fundraiser for the Kansas City Big Brothers Big Sisters chapter, which is a really fun time. I would say a specific artist to look out for, or a specific couple artists to look out for in terms of releases and shows would be Jamogi, AC Rue, and then Paris Williams.
Ooh, cannot wait. I'm so excited. It's so cool that you're a music journalist. How did you get started with that? And have you always loved writing and reviewing?
Definitely always been into writing and reviewing, whether it was kind of like by myself for myself. And that love definitely kind of pushed me forward when 3 years ago, I had a friend of a friend say, this record label that I write for, they're looking for more writers. You should apply. And so, of course, I did. And, that started the big whole journey with everything. And I wrote for them for 2 years, and I'm still friends with these people. I still occasionally write for them. And it's spun off into many more individual projects that branch out infinitely more. But I think that without that initial push and without that initial love of writing, definitely would not be where I am today.
So you write for a music blog called Start Track. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I've been with them in some capacity or another for, almost 3 years. Definitely earlier on, I was much more involved. And then as I became more involved with Manor Records, it kind of went on the back burner, but it's also okay. I helped run the blog for 2 years. It's someone else's turn. And at the same time, it allowed me and my Start Track friends to focus on our other side projects together more, which has been really important and really fulfilling. Like, for example, I had a friend who created the Black Rainbow Collective, which is kind of a sub-label, but they also do stuff with like visual art and other kinds of media. And the main thing from that is the Black Rainbow Collective zine that we began working on together. And of course, there's another Kansas City person, Eggs on Mars, their band. He and I worked together with Start Track, since the beginning. And it's been really cool to see Start Track people have their own projects and go off into the world. And it was just time for me to go off into the Manor Records world.
How do you find the music you write about? Are they submissions? Do you stumble across new music you like? Is it a mix of both?
I would say it's a good 70-30, 70% submissions, and then 30% I just randomly hear it on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing in the whole entire world. I need to get on my computer right now, immediately.
What's your favorite type of piece to write? Do you prefer like single reviews, full album reviews, reviews of shows?
If I can do it, I prefer a longer full album review, and that's just because I like to talk about the way that the songs interact with each other. And that, when you look at the album as a full thing instead of each individual song, it's really cool to see the full picture, but also be able to break it down into individual parts. But then my second favorite thing to review, I think, would be shows. And that's just because the music takes on a whole new life when it's, live and people are experiencing it.
Right, it totally does. Does writing about music give you ideas and inspiration for your own creative process?
Absolutely. And definitely hearing what other people say about their creative processes, whether it's like things that they're saying as a tip or just offhandedly, it's definitely like food for thought, I would say. Not just for me, but I think for the people who then hear what they say. A good example I would bring up is the band A Place for Owls. They had a 2024 album that I interviewed them about. And during the interview, they were talking about how you can explore one emotion in infinite ways and it can become infinite things. And I think that was kind of really cool to hear and then incorporate into my own creative.
Have you ever written about a music artist or band and then crossed paths with them later?
Yes, both intentionally and unintentionally. My favorite intentional story was that A Place for Owls album. I wrote about it, and then we drove out to Denver to see them for my birthday that year for the album release show. That was very cool. And then unintentionally, I would say it was, I can't even remember what band, but I remember the physical interaction we had. I met them later at the Focello Music Festival, and we were talking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I reviewed this album, and I loved this, and this about it. And they were like, oh my gosh, that was you? And that was so much fun.
That's so cool. I bet that was really rewarding.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to start writing about their local music scene, what's the best way for them to get into that?
I would say just do it. Don't have any fear. Don't have any qualms. Nobody is going to look at it and say, oh my God, that grammar is the worst thing I've ever seen. They don't care. They don't care. I would say the most important thing is do it from your heart first and do it from your brain second. And the reason I say that is because that's how people listen to music. And what you can then do with that is you can put it on your Instagram, you can make a blog, do it however you want. But the most important thing is that you lead with your heart and then your brain follows.
I totally agree. I think that's like a key rule that you can apply for everything in life. Yeah, that's great advice. So if someone wants to go and support the local Kansas City, Missouri music scene, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would definitely be looking up, venues specifically, and just a couple to start that process would be, of course, Farewell. There's Record Bar, Hillsiders. There's Jay Rieger, their Electric Park venue. And what you can do from there is you can go on their site or their page and you can look at their calendar and see this person's playing then and this person's playing then and they're playing then. And from there you can go out to those shows, but you can also say, I know this person is from Kansas City and I'm going to support them by streaming or with merch money or whatever. And I just think that's maybe the most easiest way that somebody could go about it.
So looking back at everything you've done so far, what's something that you're most proud of?
Everything that I've been most proud of always boils down to the same thing, and it's the friendships that I've made along the way. Sounds very corny, but that's the answer. Something that I'm very proud of, even more specifically, is the band Summer Brews. The way that I met them and I formed that friendship and I maintained that friendship, that's been very cool and important to me. And it goes back to the leading with your heart, letting your brain follow. If you are someone who is not in it for the clout, if you're not in it for the gains, if you're just in it for the love of the game, people are going to pick up on that. And I think that having that attitude and being able to show my authentic self is probably what I'm most proud of.
That's beautiful. What is something you look forward to improving?
I always want to improve my writing, even if I don't have an idea of what exactly I want it to be in the end. But it's always, I think to myself, I could have said this differently. I described the music as this kind of thing. I should have said it like this. But, I think every creative thinks that about their work in some way or another and probably feels those feelings about it in some way or another. And so I feel like that answer would apply to a lot of different creative people as well.
I have a quick question I just thought
Yes.
of, if I don't forget it real quick. When you're writing a song, do you ever have it's almost like you channel something from somewhere else, like the universe or energy or something, in like a melody with lyrics or some part of a song, just almost, for lack of a better word, downloads into you?
Absolutely. And I think when I have noticed it the most in the past is when I've been writing some of the more folk kind of related stuff. Like I'm an Appalachian kid. I have Appalachian roots to the core. And stuff that kind of, picks up on the mountains and the prairie, like in some spiritual or physical form or another, it's like a beam of light erupts from my head into the sky. That's what it feels like.
I can totally relate. And I think it's just it's like a spiritual, supernatural experience. What advice would you give someone wanting to break into their local music scene?
First thing I would say is make friends. And it sounds corny, but it's true. And that's just because those friends that you make are going to be your most valuable connections, whether it's you guys form a band together or they say, oh my God, let's go to this cool show. And they introduce you to somebody cool, whether it's as a fan or as a friend, or, they kind of expand your reach in the music scene in some form or another. That's definitely the first step. And then the second would be to just begin creating. And even if you think it's terrible, send it to your friends, show them. It doesn't matter. Just show them.
Totally agree. I feel like that's how every great artist starts. I've heard a lot of people say oh, I started making music as a joke, or making funny music, or just whatever came to me. And if you keep at it and it's something you really want to do, you're going to do it and you're going to get so much better at it. That's great advice. So what's next for you?
The thing about working with the music scene in the way that I do is everyone is my friend and all I'm doing is supporting my buddies. And so most directly what's next for me is we have a artist that's going on a tour this fall that I'm going to be doing tour management for. And that's going to be exciting. I love tour managing. But then even further, next year, of course, we'll have Manor Fest 9 and I'll go to Fochella 9 immediately after because resting is terrible and I should never sleep.
Right.
Exactly. But what's always next for me is always going to be some version of hanging out with my friends.
Love that. And I feel like what you do, it's in a way, you're just hanging out with your friends and doing stuff that you would do with your friends. That's so cool.
Exactly.
That's amazing. What's the next Manor Records event coming up?
The most very upcoming one it's the end of July, and it's going to be one of the Bring Your Own Vinyl fundraisers. Those are one of my favorite kinds of events just because we get a lot of different kinds of people than we might otherwise because it is a fundraiser for another nonprofit. So it's kind of we're merging the worlds. But even further on from that, there will be a to be announced kind of end of fall, winterish kind of event that is going to be another fundraiser for us. And it's going to involve a big performance from a bunch of different artists and a lot of cool like visual art from a lot of local artists and kind of like a merging of the worlds for all the arts in the city.
Yeah, so listeners, if you're in the Kansas City, Missouri area, definitely tap in. So do you see yourself continuing to do what you're doing now? And are there any more things you want to branch out to?
I will always do this in some capacity, I think. And obviously, my degree and my master's are not in any way related. But I think in always some capacity, I will always be kind of here in the music scene in the present moment, whether it's in somebody's basement at a terrible house show or, you know, at the most wonderful giant venue in the world, regardless of what I do for my day job, if it is my day job or not. But I will always be here in some capacity or another. If you are ever nervous about forming a band, if you're ever nervous about finding people to form a band, look on your local Reddit, post a thing. I promise you will find somebody. Post something on your Instagram or your Snapchat. You will find someone who knows someone. The most important part about forming a band is overcoming the fear of making music with other people, because once you get into doing it, it is the most rewarding experience of your life.
Thank you so much, Val. I had a great time meeting with you, and I think the listeners are going to really love everything you shared. One more time, can you let the audience know where to find you, your band, and Manor Records?
The band is Lottie Lum on all the streaming platforms, soon to be on all the Instagrams and social medias. The Manor Records Instagram is Manor, MANOR, Records, RECORDS. KC, and it's pretty much the same on all other platforms. We also have a YouTube that you can find from the Instagram, or you can find us on the YouTube and then go to the Instagram. It's all pretty much the same. Furthermore, my personal Instagram account is eggs, EGGS _ EGGSS, and you can always reach out to me with any music questions.
This was so much fun. Thank you so
Yes.
much for meeting with me. And
Absolutely.
listeners, please check out Val, her band Lottie Lum, and Manor Records. And definitely if you're in the KC area, go to a show.